I'm here today, Mr. President, to try to extend the National Flood Insurance Program. It appears to me, I hope I'm wrong, and I know, Mr. President, that you agree with me, that we're headed toward a shutdown. If that happens, that means that the National Flood Insurance Program will come to a halt. I don't want people to worry too much. If you already have National Flood Insurance, the program will continue to pay claims. But as long as government is shut down, you will not be able to buy new insurance. That's important because flood insurance is a huge part of the commerce of our real estate markets in America. For most Americans, the purchase of a home is their biggest single financial decision they'll ever make. And in many areas, not just coastal states, but many other states, you cannot purchase a home if you have to borrow the money without flood insurance. So if we allow the National Flood Insurance Program to expire, it's going to shut down home sales where the entity owning the money requires flood insurance. It's just going to shut it down. The real estate industry, for a variety of reasons, in part because of President Biden's inflation, is already having a tough time. This will make it worse. My bill would take the current flood insurance program and just extend it as is until December 31, 2023. If we don't do this, I want to make this clear as well, Mr. President. Some of my fellow citizens may be saying, well, what's the big deal? Just don't buy it from the federal government. You can't buy it from anybody else. This is the federal program, imperfect as it is the only game in town. So if you're ready to buy a home and close on a home and you go to the mortgage lender and say, I need to borrow the money, and they say you have to buy flood insurance to get the loan, the federal government is the only entity you can go to. You cannot buy, for all practical purposes, private flood insurance in America today. I mentioned that the NFIP was imperfect. I understate it. As I said yesterday on the floor, the National Flood Insurance Program, as administered by FEMA, is a mess. As I said yesterday, it looks like someone knocked over a urine sample. FEMA made the program even worse a year or so ago with its risk rating 2.0. It went out and hired a consultant to design a new algorithm that made changes in the program without telling policyholders the basis for those changes. I've met with FEMA a number of times. I said, well, can I see your algorithm? They say if we showed you, we'd have to kill you. And I'm in Congress. We're in litigation with FEMA right now. Let me say it again, risk rating 2.0 made it even worse than it already was. Ever since I've been in the United States Senate, I have been working with, 20 different senators, and probably 50 to 100 House members are involved to try to fix the flood insurance program. And it's been very difficult. We haven't been able to do it, but we will continue to try. But in the meantime, the only thing worse than a bad flood insurance program is no flood insurance. Because as imperfect as it may be, FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program is the only game in town. And if we allow this program to expire, it is going to really, really, really hurt the American people. It's going to really, really hurt the real estate industry. It's going to really, really hurt folks out there who have saved the money and they're ready to buy a home, but they can't do it because they can't purchase flood insurance. So, for that reason, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs be discharged from further consideration of S2968. That's my bill that would just extend the current program for flood insurance, imperfect as it may be, until December 31, 2023. And I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I further ask the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President,
Senator from Kentucky.
reserving the right to object, once again we are asked to extend the flood program without any reforms to protect the taxpayers. Like many federal programs, this federal program is well-intentioned, but it may well very be the best real-life example of moral hazard. We are told that the program is funded through insurance premiums, but the premiums are below the market rate, and so the program is eternally and consistently short of money. A 2014 report by the Government Accountability Office found that the flood program collected $17 billion less than the market would have required. For all practical and purposes, the flood program is insolvent. Just a few years ago, the flood program owed $30 billion to the taxpayer. Congress later canceled $16 billion of that debt, but the flood program has not made any progress in repaying the taxpayer. The total now stands that the flood program owes $20 billion to the taxpayers with no way of repaying that money. Perhaps the greatest insult to the taxpayers, though, is the lack of true limits on this delinquent program. There are no limits on how many claims that can be filed or how much money can be received for a policyholder. So it isn't that you have a $3 million flood policy, you could have a $3 trillion policy. There are no limits. There are also no limits on how big your house can be. You can have a $10 million house, you can have a $20 million house, a $50 million house, and the taxpayer subsidizes your house. Rather than encourage people to leave flood-prone areas, this program encourages people to stay and rebuild time and time again. In thousands of instances, the program encourages people to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. According to the Pew Charitable Trust, over 150,000 properties have been rebuilt over and over again. In fact, 25 to 30% of flood program claims are made by the policyholders whose properties have flooded time and time again. Over 2,000 properties have flooded more than 10 times. One home in Bachelor, Louisiana, flooded 40 times and received a total of $428,000 of flood insurance payments. 40 times. No one should keep rebuilding in a house that floods 40 times. But the record, if you can believe it, isn't Bachelor, Louisiana, it's Virginia, where one home flooded 41 times and received payments of over $600,000, all subsidized by the taxpayer. Adding insult to injury, Congressional Budget Office found that the flood program tends to benefit the wealthy, and that 23% of the subsidized coastal properties were not even policyholders' primary residence. So realize what this program's doing. It's subsidizing insurance for the rich and famous for their beach houses. There are no limits. It subsidizes people who have $10 million homes get subsidized government insurance. It's true, the government forces the taxpayers to pay and rebuild the summer homes of the rich. In fact, sometimes it seems that the flood program caters directly to the wealthy. Nearly 80% of the National Flood Insurance Program policies are located in counties that rank within the top 20% of income. Enough is enough. It is an insult to rob the taxpayers to give to the rich. This is why I offer an amendment that, if we could come to an agreement today, would require that the federal program not insure your second house, not insure your beach house. If you live there, it's your only house, it will be included. If it's your second house, your beach house, it's not going to be included. And we would set a cap on the amount. Who in their right mind thinks we should be subsidizing insurance for $10 million mansions? It's crazy that anybody would think that that's what we should do. So I offer a compromise today. Extend the program. Let's keep the program. We'll keep the program open. We won't miss a beat, but we'll set some limits on the houses. So what we'd like to start with would be a cap of $250,000. Those houses below $250,000 would be subsidized, would get subsidized insurance. Above $250,000, you buy your own. Also, my proposal would not allow you to use the insurance if this is your vacation home, if this is your secondary home. So, Mr. President, I ask the senator to modify his request so that Paul amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to consider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Mr. President,
Does the senator so modify his request?
reserving the right to modify or not modify. Senator Paul, as usual, makes some very good points. I agree with him wholeheartedly that the National Flood Insurance Program is a mess. It needs to be fixed. I want to make the record clear that in Louisiana, my people are working people. My coast is a working coast. My people aren't wealthy millionaires who have 3 or 4 homes on the beach. These are ordinary people who get up every day, go to work, obey the law, pay their taxes, and try to do the right thing by their kids. They can barely afford one home. It's not only the coast that we're talking about. In 2016, in the middle of my state, again, not mansions, just working class people, we had 24 inches of rainfall in about a day and a half. The homes that flooded, and many of them did, were not anywhere near a body of water. If you get 24 inches of rain in a day and a half, your home is going to flood. I don't care if you're living on Pikes Peak. So this program is meant to help those people as well. But in pointing that out, I don't want to take anything away from Senator Paul's excellent points. He is, however, mistaken in one critical respect. When you buy flood insurance through the Federal National Flood Insurance Program, the most you can collect on your home as a result of one flood is $250,000. It is not accurate to say that $1 million home can collect $1 million in damages from a flood. That's just not true. If there is a flood and you own $1 million home and you own a $250,000 home, and the owners of those two homes both have have national flood insurance, the most under the policy they can collect is $250,000. So why do you want to tell a person who owns $1 million home that they can't insure their home? You're just telling them They can't buy flood insurance, so the flood insurance program has less money to cash flow it. It makes no sense. Now, Senator Paul is correct, and it's one of the things we're trying to fix, that there has been abuse in terms of some homes. Senator Paul mentioned the example of Louisiana, but there are other states, many others, where homes have flooded 3 or 4 times and they keep getting flood insurance. If I can say anything good about the current National Flood Insurance Program today, I would say that FEMA has taken steps to try to prevent that from happening, so that if you flood a certain number of times, you have to move. And I know the senator didn't. I don't think I'm disagreeing with him on that. I think we're in agreement. But let me tell you the second and the main reason I can't accept Senator Paul's change. And for me, it has to do with what's right. There are probably 20 different senators. Well, there are 100 senators who care about flood insurance, but there are about 20 different senators who want to be involved in any changes made to this program. And I dare say there are 50 to 100 members of the House. Now, Mr. President, as you know, when we bring a bill to the floor through unanimous consent, we don't just walk down here one day and do it. We let all of our senators, fellow colleagues, our fellow senators know what we're about to do. So if they want to come down and object, they can do that. And that's what I did with my bill, which just keeps the current program and extends it until December 31, so we'll get past the shutdown and we won't keep people from buying homes. But Senator Paul's changes have not been sent to all members of the Senate. It's called a hotline. And I anticipate that Rand will have other changes, and that's fine. The easy thing for me to do today would be to agree with one of his changes. I'm not sure it makes that much difference because the amount of damages you can claim on a flood is $250,000, but the easiest thing for me to do today would be to agree to one of Rand's changes. But that would be stabbing my colleagues in the back. Because I can assure you, knowing how many of my colleagues feel about the National Flood Insurance Program, they would want to be here today to weigh in. And I just can't do that to them, even though it would allow me to get this passed. I also think, Mr. President, that if we make changes to the National Flood Insurance Program, those 50 to 100 House members that I'm talking about are likely not to, some of them are likely not to allow the changes, and that's why they would object to. And that's why my objective has been, and I need to stand behind it, is just to take the current program and extend it to December 31. So for that reason, I don't agree to the modification.
Senators not agreed to the modification. Is there objection to the original request?
Mr. President.
The senator from Kentucky.
Reserving the right to object, the process is similar to what has been described, but not exactly it has been described. The bill is sent out. Everybody gets a chance to object. People who choose to object can come. That's also announced. The objections are announced, and we come to the floor. If the senator wanted to work together on this could be modified today, and someone else would have to come and object, and that is announced to all 100 senators, and often works that way. But today what we have is a situation where I'm offering an amendment to reform taxpayer-subsidized insurance. And it's being rejected by one senator, not by all senators, not in place of all senators. They have a chance to come. It's been announced. They could come and object to this if they wanted. But here's the thing. What I'm trying to do is modify a program so the average ordinary taxpayer does not have to pay for rich people's flood insurance for their beach houses. About half of the houses that are insured in this program that loses billions of dollars every year, that's $20 billion in the hole, about half the homes are worth $500,000 or more. Do you know any regular working folk that have $500,000 homes on the beach? No. If you have a $500,000 house on the beach, buy your own damn insurance. The taxpayer should not have to buy your insurance. So I would ask the senator, we can do this today. There are other senators on the floor. They can come running from hither and yon, and they can object to this. But I would ask the senator, let's modify the program so rich people don't get their houses insured by the government and subsidized by the taxpayer. We could change the limits to $500,000. That would cut out half of the homes in the U.S., half of the beach houses, half of the rich people in our country who are getting subsidized insurance. Make the limit $500,000. If we make it $500,000, the program will be half as big and it will lose half as much money. Let's modify this program. So I would ask the senator to modify his proposal with my amendment. And my amendment would say you can't use the insurance for your second home, only your primary residence. And if you have a $500,000 mansion on the beach, guess what? You get to buy your own insurance. That's my modification, and I would ask the senator to accept the Paul amendment that's at the desk.
Does the senator agree to the modification?
Reserving the right to accept or not accept. Again, Senator Paul, I understand his points, and they're very good ones. I would point out that his proposal, we have about 84.7 million owner-occupied homes in the United States. Let's call it 85 million homes in the United States. Senator Paul's amendment would exclude 52.5 million of them. $500,000 on a home is a lot of money. But I think in places like California and Connecticut and New York, where we have seen cost of living different from in my state, there are plenty of ordinary Americans, middle-class Americans, who have scrimped and saved to put together the money to borrow $500,000, and I don't want to hurt them. But the second and the main reason I can't agree to Senator Paul's proposal, I'm just not going to stab my fellow senators in the back. They do not know about these changes that are being proposed. They may be good changes, and I like the way Senator Paul is thinking. But let me say it again. I know of at least 20 senators, some of whom are not in Washington, who care about flood insurance. And if I start agreeing to changes for the short-term satisfaction of getting to pass a bill, it's just not worth it to me. And I am not going to stab them in the back. They have the right to be here and participate in these changes, and they are not here because they don't know about them. So for that reason, I do not concur in Senator Paul's amendment.
Objection to the modification has been heard. Is there objection to the underlying the original motion?
Mr. President.
Senator from Kentucky.
Reserving the right to object, what I'm trying to find here is there a compromise? Is there some level of rich person that maybe the taxpayer could say, enough's enough, they ought to pay their own way? Is there some level of rich person's mansion that maybe the average ordinary taxpayer should not have to subsidize their insurance? So we've tried $500,000, which is about half the homes the ordinary working class people in our country have to insure. Why don't we try, if we can't do $500,000, let's try mansions of $750,000. You'd say, well, how many are there? 25% of the national federal subsidized insurance are homes of a $750,000 a year. We're not talking about ordinary people now. We are talking about rich, very rich people getting subsidized insurance from a program that loses billions of dollars and has to be bailed out every year. We have a government with a $1.7 trillion deficit. It goes on year after year. Nobody does anything, just reauthorize it. Today we could make a compromise. So I offer the senator a compromise. If $500,000 is too cheap and you want to insure $500,000 mansions, will you at least modify it to exclude mansions of $750,000 or more? I think that's the least we can do, and I would ask unanimous consent to accept the Paul motion at the desk that indicates $750,000 as the limit for the insurance.
Mr. President,
Senator Kennedy.
reserving the right to object. I fear I'm not being clear, and I'm sorry for that, Mr. President. Let me say it again. If you own a $250,000 home and you own a $750,000 home, neither one of you can buy more than $250,000 worth of insurance. Because the maximum amount of insurance that you can buy through the National Flood Insurance Program is $250,000. So what's the point of excluding someone who owns a $750,000 home? I realize it's in vogue to denigrate rich people, but they can't buy any more insurance. It would be different if someone could buy $750,000 worth of flood insurance who owned a $750,000 home, but they can't. It's capped at $250,000. So I have to respectfully disagree with my friend on that. And number two, I don't want to belabor this. I'm not going to stab my fellow senators in the back. The 20-plus senators with whom I've spoken to try to negotiate a new and better flood insurance program do not know about these changes. And I'd like to agree to Rand's suggestions, but if I do, I'm stabbing my fellow senators in the back, and it's just not worth it to me because they don't know about any of this. So for that reason, I respectfully object to Senator Paul's amendment.
Senators objected to the modification. Is there objection to the underlying request?
Mr. President.
Senator from Kentucky.
Reserving the right to object, it is certainly not my intent to denigrate rich people. I aspire to be one someday. But I don't aspire to ask for free stuff for government if I ever become a rich person. Why would we subsidize the insurance of rich people? Is there no limit? Is there no limit? Is there no possibility of compromise on some mansion that is too large to be in this program? What about $10 million? We've tried $250,000. That was too little. We still, the insistence is we must insure these homes. We've tried $500,000, but the insistence is no, everybody should get it. I don't think rich people need subsidized insurance. The program loses billions of dollars every year. We've tried $750,000, but apparently there still is this need and this desire to insure rich people's beach houses. Why don't we try one last time? We'll try something that I think anybody could compromise to and anybody would accept. And certainly I wouldn't want to be the one justifying a program that gives people who have $10 million mansions insurance. Why not accept it and make someone on the other side support such a ridiculous policy? So my final proposal today will be to ask unanimous consent that the Paul amendment at the desk would exclude $10 million mansions from government-subsidized insurance. I think that's the least we can do. If we could get that compromise, we'd bring at least some sense of sanity to this crazy program.
Is there objection to the senator's request to modify? Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. If I own a $10 million home, and I assure you I do not, and my neighbor's home is $250,000. That's its value, which is more like it in Louisiana. And we both go to an insurance agent, and they say, and we say we want to buy national flood insurance. because we can't get a mortgage without it. Then the insurance agents are going to say, okay, neighbor whose home is worth $250,000, I can write you a policy, maximum $250,000. And then the agent's going to turn to me with my $10 million home, which I can assure you is fictitious. And the agent's going to say, I can only sell you $250,000 home. The suggestion that somebody with a $10 million home is being insured for $10 million is just not accurate. It's just not accurate. So what good is it going to do to tell someone in a $10 million home who wants to buy $250,000 worth of flood insurance, the same amount as his neighbor? What good is it going to do to exclude him? Some can beat themselves on the chest and say, boy, we stuck it to those rich people. But they're not getting any more insurance. And what it's going to mean to the program is there's going to be fewer and less premiums coming into the program, which will make it insolvent. You can see the difficulty in trying to reach agreement on reforms. That's why I'm going to say it again. I have proposed a clean, if you will, proposal that will just extend the current program, imperfect as it may be, until December 31. If we don't do this, it is going to really, really, really hurt. It's not going to hurt the rich folks. It's going to hurt the ordinary middle-class Americans who are trying to buy a home. And the second and final reason, or the third and final reason, frankly, if it were up to me to get this passed, because I'm really worried about it, as you can tell, I'd probably agree to Rand's proposal, but I'm just not going to stab my colleagues in the back. They don't know about this proposal, and I think that of the 20 or so of my colleagues that I have met with about changing the flood insurance program, I know they'd like to have their say. And if I agree to Rand's proposal today, because they don't know about his proposal, I would be stabbing them in the back, and I just can't do it, Mr. President. It's just not worth it to me. So for that reason, I respectfully object.
Senators objected to the request to modify. Is there objection to the senator's original motion?
Mr. President.
Senator from Kentucky.
Reserving the right to object, let the record show from this discussion today that the senator has objected to any limits on taxpayer-subsidized flood insurance. Any limits. $250,000, $500,000, $750,000, even $10 million. This is a program that loses billions of dollars every year. This is a program that can't work for the poor people because we got so many rich people in it. Half of the homes in the program cost over $500,000. So this is a problem. This is a program that loses money every year, and the senator is unwilling to accept any limits on this. There's this argument that somehow he's defending all the Democrat senators who can't come here, but he could easily have said, I'm not willing to object to this because these are reasonable proposals, and forced the Democrats to object to this. But he's taken this upon himself to defend the status quo, to defend the inclusion of $10 million mansions in this program. So I do object.
Objection is heard. Senator from Louisiana.
You're getting tired of me saying this, I know. This rich $10 million American that Senator Paul keeps talking about can't buy any more insurance than the American who owns a $250,000 home. He just can't. And I'm going to try again. I'll be back tomorrow. And like the Terminator, I'll be back. Because in trying to punish the rich, when they can't buy any more insurance than the ordinary American, Mr. President, like you and me, $250,000. That's the limit for the rich American and the middle-class American. This is going to put the entire real estate industry in jeopardy. And it's also going to put a lot of ordinary middle-class Americans out there who have scrimped and saved, and they've got the money for the down payment, and they're ready to buy a home, but they're not going to be able to buy it because they can't get flood insurance, and their mortgage lender requires it. And by the time government opens back up, I hope it's a short period of time, but we don't know, those interest rates, instead of 7.5%, could be 8%. And look, I get the politics of beating up on the rich, but the rich have nothing to do with this. This is about helping ordinary Americans. But I appreciate, Mr. President, your patience in listening to me today. And for that, with that, I think I need to yield the floor, do I not, Mr. President? To whom should I yield it?
Senator can simply yield the floor.
Senator Hirono.